Star Wars, the timeless, beloved classic that everyone unanimously loved and is now sort of just a polarizing mess of disappointment and, just a general feeling of, dang, Disney really does kind of ruin everything, don't they? Star Wars will always hold a place in mine and other people's hearts, but there is something extremely painful about watching what you love burn to the ground, folding at the whims of a megacorporation so up their own asses that they can't even admit when they've made a grave IP-destroying mistake. All of us watching this video probably, I hope, love Star Wars. We love the complex lore, the sci-fi, the morally ambiguous characters, the idea of the Force, this governing, omnipresent entity that lives and breathes within every human being, and of course the samurai-inspired lightsabers. However, loving Star Wars and loving what Star Wars has become are two very stark differences. Take a look at any of the new Star Wars discography in the past 5 years, and I don't think you can tell me one single IP that has even scratched the surface of what Empire Strikes Back was. You could argue for The Mandalorian, but the first 2 seasons are clearly better than the rest. Maybe Andor. Andor, to be honest, was just amazing, but I'm still going to hold my breath until the other seasons come out. We have to remember there's only a single season of Andor currently. And lastly, I would hear arguments for Rogue One. Rogue One is a brilliant film, and it is so specifically brilliant because it is a standalone story bringing history and context to one of the most important missions of the Luke Skywalker trilogy that had not been dealt with before. It's something that actually made sense from a narrative perspective to make, that we all wanted to see. And it wraps up pretty well because we already have the sequel trilogy to know what happens after. But we have to remember that Rogue One is a standalone epic and is not meant to be the blockbuster that the sequel trilogy is. We are not living in a perfect world, but by God, the failure that has been the Disney Star Wars project has been one of the most monumental disappointments in cinema history. So much that the initially despised prequels has now obtained a new idealistic opinion, where we can actually appreciate what George Lucas was going for in the films. Now, I grew up in a generation that actually had the prequels as their main Star Wars films, and I always thoroughly enjoyed them. It was cool. You had Darth Maul's amazing design, Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon Jinn, Natalie Portman killing it as Padme, and Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin, which has actually aged pretty well. To be honest, Anakin in the prequels kind of acts like how I act in relation to seeing the new Star Wars movies. So relatable. And Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan has practically obtained a cult following so much that even Disney thought it was right to make the Kenobi series, which I actually personally enjoyed, but public opinion would say that it was just okay. But then again, I'm just a big nostalgic nerd. Now, I'm not trying to say that everything recently is pointless and horrible and bad. Again, I do enjoy some of the things that were made recently. Andor, Mandalorian, Tales of the Jedi, etc., etc. However, the new Acolyte series I personally think shows everything currently wrong with the way Disney is handling our beloved Star Wars, and many people feel the same way that I do, and Disney's reaction to the people who literally fund their company has been mostly, "Nah, you're just sexist and racist and all the other stuff. Go away." So I'm making this video pretty much to contest that very point, because I want to make it clear that it's not just Disney's pandering to minority groups that has stunted the growth of the IP and made fans hate it. Whatever side of the political spectrum you fall under, we all agree that performative activism is bad, and it becomes even worse when they suspend good world building in favor of it. It's actually far, far deeper than just a woke agenda, and has almost everything to do with creative decisions that ruin the writing and ruin the world. Yes, some of these decisions, as we will see, can be political or social in nature, but it still is embedded in the idea of creative decisions that just make no sense to the source material or otherwise leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the audience and disrespects the things that made Star Wars great in the first place. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the shite. This is The Problem with Star Wars Today. Now, I want to start off by asking you, the audience, a little honest question. If you fall under the category of someone who thinks the writing of Star Wars has degraded, I would posit this question. has it ever really been that good? Luke's story is basically interchangeable with every other Prince That Was Promised story, but just in a sand planet. Actually, now thinking about it, it sounds quite familiar. It's not novel, it's not particularly complex, and it's played out in a pretty playful and nonchalant way. We have to remember that Star Wars is a children's story. It was made as a children's sci-fi fantasy, and there's a lot of classic 20th century gags and effects that are kind of pantomime and, frankly, unserious. But it did this kind of playful storytelling in an interesting and self-aware way, in the same way that Back to the Future did. It's not meant to be brooding, serious, Batman-esque grittiness. It's just good, plain, nerdy fun. The thing that made Star Wars stand out was really its setting and world. The concept of the Force, the monkish Jedi Order, the hateful, vengeful Sith Order, the robots, the speeders, the different species, and the intergalactic battles, the endearing characters, and the timeless and historic battle between good and evil. This is what made Star Wars really cool. Otherwise, it's just another children's fantasy, just like the million others that arose out of the 70s and 80s. We have to remember that Star Wars kind of began the Hollywood modern sci-fi trend, so the conventional writing is actually pretty expected. And whenever I recommend one of my friends to watch Star Wars, I always have to give them the disclaimer that the writing just is conventional. It's not really bad or good, it's just basic sci-fi save-the-day stuff, and the conflict is interesting, but nothing groundbreaking. Even with the "Luke, I am your father" stuff, which was cool at the time, but again, looking back, it's just not very novel. In truth, it was only when Star Wars started to actually get serious that people began to complain. Anakin's story is very dark and highly conflicted. But that is precisely why most of the early criticism for the prequels made no sense to me. Everyone was complaining about Jar Jar Binks and how they weren't really taking the material as seriously as they should. But bro, when the fuck did they? The cantina scene alone and the crazy, quirky battle sequences should tell you well enough that Star Wars has always had that air of just general childishness spliced into the cool and grandiose conflict. So let me get that criticism immediately out of the way. I want to make it clear that the problems of the new Star Wars projects aren't just about the fact that some of them are kinda out there, man, and you have to kinda suspend belief a little. Like in the new Acolyte show, they have to deal with putting out a fire in space. Generally, fire requires oxygen, so you can see there's a little bit of a problem here. But as stupid as that sounds, it's really no more stupid than having little dwarves win you a battle against literal born-and-bred killers with technology so far into their own technological future that they might as well hold little Ewok witch trials for the stormtroopers. The problem for me can be summarized in one word: continuity. Continuity is extremely important in filmmaking, and that's why when you work on films, if you've ever worked on films before, you will know that there is someone, sometimes even multiple someones, whose sole job it is to make sure that the script and the materials and the filming as a whole stays true to what happened before, so as not to be completely unbelievable or just plain wrong. These are called continuity supervisors, or just script supervisors, and all films generally have them. But we must remember that continuity also means character continuity. It's important to have continuity in all aspects, in Star Wars in particular. Now, why do you ask? Well, because it's Star Wars. It's a beloved IP that everyone pretty much knows about, so if you take some creative liberties in exchange for making it make sense to the world you're trying to insert your project into, it sort of just falls over and fucks the whole thing up for everyone. But hey, I ain't pointing no fingers here. Of course not. Like, for example, having characters that were one way before, stoic, ponderous, ambitious, driven by a force to do good, and never ever giving up. Perseverance. Yeah, screw that, am I right? And then having them completely and nonsensically shift every single facet about their being for purposes that aren't even really that damning. I mean, Okay, cat's out of the bag, I'm talking about Luke Skywalker. But come on, it isn't even remotely believable that one incident, which by the way has happened multiple times before in this world, could completely alter Luke to a point of not even being recognizably similar to the Luke that we all cared about. I mean, all the time of Yoda training Luke in the Dagobah system, just so he could completely ignore everything Yoda taught him? Because of one incident? I mean, come on, that's just like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Come on. Character continuity is so important when making sequels to already established characters, because that's how we recognize them. I mean, this is like basic 101 filmmaking at your state college, and J.J. Abrams and his team couldn't even bother to think of it. Continuity is also important because this is what happens. You take everything that was great and loved about the George Lucas films, and you say, let's change everything. But not in a way that's creative or tasteful. Let's just gender bend the protagonist and make her instantly good at everything, like flying ships and the Force. And the logic for this? It's fine. She's the chosen one, you know? She's just got all them Jedis behind her, you know, all the previous Jedis, and you look at her, she's just so good at everything, instantly, because why not? What are you, some kind of sexist? Anakin was meant to be the chosen one, as we know from the great lines of Obi-Wan.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
And even this motherfucker took years to show his true potential as a Force user. And that's with him being taught and surrounded by multiple Jedis constantly. I mean, it's been said before, but Rey's character is kind of just forgettable, which is tough to do since she's literally the protagonist. This isn't because she's female or because she's new, but she just has no real believable conflict. Anakin's internal conflict was actually valid and interesting, because even if he did sometimes come off as a bit of a baby, he still had a really complex battle and a really complex purpose. Anakin, despite being the chosen one, still fails despite it, which is why his end is so bitter and tragic. His being the chosen one was never used as a crutch on which to advance his character. In fact, it's well known that Obi-Wan didn't even want to mention to Anakin that Qui-Gon thought he was truly the chosen one, because it might get to his head or something, you know, like it does for most people. The people around Rey, on the other hand, really aren't afraid to say, yup, you're the main person, and without you, we're kinda fucked. I mean, what sort of mentors do that? You're meant to humble the character so they can be even better, and only at the end, when they're properly ready, should you make that truth known to them. Another problem is that Rey is basically a girl version of Luke Skywalker, an orphan who lives on a sand planet with a mysterious past and a longing to know more about it. But don't worry, she's a girl. It's very, very different. Promise. As mentioned before, Luke's story is already not very interesting. They took an already conventional and boring motive and just thought that changing one aspect of the character would somehow make it creative, but it's really just not. And luckily, no one bought into it. Now, I don't want to focus too much on Rey's character right now, because the sins of the new movies are even greater than its protagonist, if you can believe it. There isn't enough time in this video, or maybe even on YouTube in general, for me to analyze every wrongdoing of the new films, so I'm just going to quickly do one, and in my opinion, the worst one, The Rise of Skywalker. What I'm about to say is going to be quite spoiler-filled. I'll try to refrain as much as possible, but to be honest, everyone should already know the major things I'm about to say, and if you don't, man, just live in ignorance and maybe don't watch it, mate. If you really like Star Wars, it's a better life to just live in ignorance at this point. But if you miraculously still give a shit about the new storyline and haven't seen the films, then you've been warned. So anyway, Palpatine's back, baby. Let's go! Oh, God. Oh, God. So the film starts off with Palpatine basically sending some Force voicemail across the galaxy saying, "I'm back." Evil laughter. Which, let's be honest, is just plain dumb. I mean, theoretically, and this is just me here, if I were a mega supervillain who is being hunted down by a resistance, I would maybe, just maybe, have a bit more secrecy to my grand opening. Like, maybe I'd conduct it like Sauron, you know, just like kind of letting my minion orcs do the dirty work, just so that if anyone like a Gandalf or a Frodo or any of the good guys tries to say that I'm back, no one will believe them. That's clever, but no. Palpatine eliminates doubt completely from the get-go, which means a few suspensions of belief, such as, let's ignore the fact that we somehow cannot conceive of a better villain than the ones that we already have. Let's also ignore the fact that we cannot seem to make interesting conflict without somehow riding on nostalgia. Let's just focus on the shitty film. Glad that's out of the way. Kylo Ren is like, oh, Palpatine, I gotta kill him because, you know, he can take my power and shit. And Palpatine is like, no, the rule of two, my boy. More evil laughter. And then we commence into the most pointless scavenger hunt you could ever have conceived of, baby. There's like a dagger, which is like a map and shows where things are. Which is weird to me because they make it out like the ship is ancient or something. But it's like 40 years old. Like the wreckage is about 40 years old. Like, I don't know why we need some ornate cryptology to decipher this location, like it's some 1,000-year-old Jedi temple. But then there comes a spy in the First Order. And you would have never guessed who, but dun dun dun. This guy, General Hux. Yeah, I know, like, dude... No one is surprised here. There's zero people who are surprised about this. Of course it's you. You were the main person who everyone probably would have suspected. I don't know, I just found this funny, to be honest. He goes like, I'm the spy.
I'm the spy.
Like it's a fucking Austin Powers film. And then he gets shot in the chest. So much for that character, anyway. There's so much wasted potential in characters like General Hux and Captain Phasma that it's almost laughable. The Last Jedi pretty much made General Hux comic relief. They were just like, let's blame things on him and make him the First Order punching bag. Why? Because funny haha, hee hee hoo hoo, it's funny. Which gives his character, the only real First Order general that we've been with since the first film, zero fear. They could have made Hux into a Grand Moff Tarkin character who is basically a Sith Lord without the Force, but no, you just kind of made him into a laughingstock and called it a day. Also, a real waste of a very good actor in Domhnall Gleeson, but I digress. Oh, and did I forget to mention that Lando Calrissian is back? Yeah, he's back too. Carrie Fisher is also back, and the way this film presented her is actually one of the best, if not the best things about it. Carrie Fisher's untimely passing would have meant many studios would have just not had the character in it at all, to avoid the difficulty of CGI, but they honestly did her character a lot of justice in this film, especially with the limited footage of her. Rey is, as ever, OP as hell, and whenever there is remotely any issue in the party, like Chewie getting captured by the Knights of Ren, she can just hold an entire ship in the air. Okay, cool. Do you remember the duel between Yoda and Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones when Master Yoda, one of the most powerful Jedi to have ever lived, with certainly the most experience of anyone who's ever lived, struggled to hold those pillars in the air? Yeah, neither do I. Oh, and she can also use Force Lightning now. Where did she learn that? Who knows? Who cares? She just can. She also now has something called Force Heal, which we will get to later. Rey has what is called in writing as the Superman problem. It states that Superman must have his kryptonite, because if he doesn't, then there is really nothing particularly interesting about him, since he's so damn powerful otherwise. Without limitations, characters are dull and uninteresting. Every person has a limitation, and indeed needs one. Rey is the perfect example of someone with the Superman problem. She's just too damn powerful and unbeatable, and any issue she has is just dealt with easily. I don't like using the term Mary Sue, but damn, it's hard not to. So anyway, Scavenger Hunt was useless because Kylo Ren destroys the thing, leading to Exegol, which is the Sith planet, where all the Sith sit around and brood over how much they hate things and want to kill little puppies. So now they have a fight. Rey does a stabby stab into Kylo's no-no areas, but don't worry, she has Force Heal. So she touches him for a second, now Kylo is all good, baby. Oh, perfect, lovely. That's what we want. So then Rey leaves and Han Solo gives a kind of I forgive you speech to his son. Han isn't a Jedi, so I don't know how he came back to talk to Ben Solo. Maybe it was a memory, or maybe we just have to accept that nothing in this world makes sense anymore. However, I will say that this scene was important to the story, and it was nice seeing Han and Leia's farewell. Then Palpatine goes like, the final order begins, and destroys a planet which saddens the Resistance immensely. Rey goes to a planet that Luke is on, like a former Jedi planet sort of thing, so Luke is back now too. Oh, and also Rey and Kylo have possibly one of the most awkward kisses in the history of kisses. I didn't know it could get any more awkward than Finn and Rose, but they managed to do it. The relationship between Ben and Rey was so forced, it brought me PTSD flashbacks to that one time I was constipated after eating too much cheese. It was so bad that on this rewatch, I just tried to ignore it because I still had the Acolyte to get through afterwards, so I really just couldn't be bothered, to be honest. But the real point in this movie is that Palpatine is back. How he is back is not exactly explained, but perhaps he finally managed to fulfill Darth Plagueis' method of immortality, like he was mentioning to Anakin in the first films, in the prequels. It is revealed that Snoke was just his creation, so that character is also basically just swept under the rug. I actually remember watching The Last Jedi in theaters and genuinely walking out of the cinema after Snoke died, like he was literally nothing. No fight, no crazy use of the dark side, just keeled over and died by being cut in half. I was kind of angry at the time because all the build-up, the secrecy, the scarring on his face, and his mysteriousness, he kind of just dies, you know? At the time, that really irked me because I was looking forward to seeing more about him and his history. But apparently all those scars on his face are just because it's kind of hard to keep a physical apparition in circulation. I mean, geez man, cut Palpatine some slack, won't you? He's not what he used to be. The way Palpatine can come back is revealed to be energy consumption. He kind of consumes energy, and in order to become Palpatine Prime, he needs to suck the life force of both Rey and Kylo. Which, when he does it, he still looks like he did after being zapped by Mace Windu, which I found kind of weird. Supposedly, if he was back in his prime, he would look like he did in the prequels, right? But he still looks pretty screwed up and wrinkly and sort of like a scrotum. One thing I did like was when Rey looked up at the sky when she realized that she had all the Jedi behind her. You could tell that, oh yeah, like that's Sam Jackson, that's Liam Neeson, Anakin was somewhere there saying, bring balance as I did, and it's actually pretty cool. So it basically ends after Palpatine kills Ben Solo, and Rey begins deflecting back the iconic lightning that Sidious uses, basically using his thing against him, vaporizes him, and Bob's your uncle. She then goes to Tatooine, buries Luke's lightsaber, makes her own lightsaber because we really need to sell toys. And then someone says, oh, what's your name? And she says, my name's Rey. And then looks over there seeing Luke and Leia's ghosts, and then she says, Skywalker. To this day, I still don't understand how she's a Skywalker. I think it would have been cooler if Rey actually just kept the name Palpatine and kind of made it her own. Like, imagine that. Imagine Jedi Master Palpatine teaching young children the light side of the Force. That sounds really cool. She also didn't really have an extensive relationship with Luke. They kind of just met each other recently, and most of it was just Luke getting annoyed at her. So I don't see the connection there. Either way, she identifies as a Skywalker, so don't you misidentify her now, you bloody bigot. Listen, the Skywalker trilogy, for me, ends on Endor, and I think a lot of people would probably have preferred it to be that way. The lessons to be learned from this trilogy are short and simple. Please, for the love of God, have a unified and continuous vision, and make sure that that vision is not clouded by outward influences that have nothing to do with the world or the story. As mentioned previously, the best part about these films is really that it made us appreciate the prequels, because at least those had an actual cohesive vision. For all the flaws of George Lucas, whatever you want to say about the guy, he knew what he wanted, and he had a solid and consistent vision for his project which fit with everything else. Like, the prequels may not have had a solid script or great dialogue, but it had amazing lore. The lore is actually really good in the prequels, and it fits seamlessly into the Star Wars canon. This trilogy, on the other hand, just felt confused, lazy, and contrived. It felt like Abrams and Johnson were constantly at war with the scripts and the world building, which made them come to a stalemate of the trilogy that we have today. I do actually think that Abrams is a great director. I love the Cloverfield sagas, I enjoyed Star Trek a lot, even if I realize that it's not exactly the next generation. I feel like Star Wars for him was just constantly trying to do damage control for a line that you already let out of the cage and can't put back in. With all that being said, I think there was room at this point in Star Wars to try to actually revitalize it, and some projects have succeeded. I would love nothing more than to talk about the greatness that could be the Andor series. The first season was so good, and I'm super excited about it. I know that the more cynical people have probably given up on Star Wars as it is, but not everything being made is bad, and I, for one, just love to see the world being expanded in a tasteful and non-confused way. The problem is that where one good thing exists, there also exists this other thing that is just the antithesis of that thing. And this finally gets us to The Acolyte, the newest installment in the Star Wars world. We're finally here, boys. We bloody did it. Let's go. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. The Acolyte. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with all of you. I could barely get through the first damn episode. After watching The Rise of Skywalker, I just wanted to cry like a little baby. But the Acolyte, oh, the Acolyte, would not let me do this. I was sort of busy the hours beforehand and I just wanted to relax, but my goodness, this thing was a slog to get through from a lore perspective. It got worse and worse and worse, and the end just sealed it up for me. Starting positively, there's maybe two good things about this series. Firstly, Lee Jung-jae's character is pretty cool. He's basically Qui-Gon Jinn before Qui-Gon Jinn. Cool character. If you're going to watch the series, don't, then he's probably going to be your favorite. However, the second cool character in it, Indara, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, known for films such as The Matrix, is so cool. She's such a good character. I love seeing Carrie-Anne Moss in new stuff, and her as a Jedi, actually a pretty smart move because she's a great fighter, and she's dead in the first 10 minutes. Okay. Gotcha. Now, I don't actually have a problem with them killing off Carrie-Anne Moss, but it's just slightly disappointing because she looked pretty cool in the role. She died in classic Jedi fashion, saving an innocent, because this lady, for some reason, is on a revenge mission and is racist towards Jedi. Not very progressive of her, to be honest. She spares the bystander, and then we cut to who is revealed to be her twin sister, who miraculously has the same hairstyle as the other one does. Not a lucky day, I guess. Some Jedi Knights come over searching for her, and she ends up being a Jedi defector who was in training on Coruscant to be a Jedi Knight. En route to be on trial in front of the Jedi Council, she encounters some prisoners who really don't believe in the justice of the Jedi. And it is at this point in the series where you realize that the series is trying to villainize the Jedi Order. Now, normally that would be okay if the Jedi Order were not being grossly misrepresented. First of all, if this is 100 years before the events in the prequels, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Master Yoda would actually still be the leader of the Jedi Council, from what I remember, right? Now, I will grant that I've never read the High Republic books. The reason why is because I hear they're pretty bad, so I'll fully admit that there's probably some information that I just don't have. And I mention this because at the start of it, it states that there's Force users who learn the Force in secret. Towards the end, we see this dude with a red lightsaber who I can only guess is one of these people. So you're telling me that there are people who are not Jedi, who learn about the Force, particularly the dark side of the Force, who wear black, have red lightsabers, who want vengeance, and have an immense hatred for the Jedi. But remember, they're not Sith Lords, okay? Capiche? Good. The amount of mental gymnastics required to make this story make sense is just immense. It's funny, like, I can actually imagine the scriptwriters in a room having migraines over how the hell they're going to kill off these guys before the real Sith come about. The show's cinematography and script is just kind of boring. Like, it's not bad, it's just not good, you know? Like, it's not really memorable like The Mandalorian or Andor is, it's just kinda okay. The show is filled with useless characters like Dean Charles Chapman's character, the guy who played Tommen Baratheon in Game of Thrones. He's meant to be the sort of Jedi Master dude who looks like what a child would dress up as to see an R-rated movie. I think I could have probably put his beard on better, but that's just me. On that topic, the budget of this show is like $170 million, and I cannot fathom investing that much money into a show that is this forgettable. Now, we recall the time when Disney promised that Star Wars shows would feel just like movies, and let's be fair, they were completely and utterly right. These really do feel like the Disney Star Wars movies, and it's chock full of forgettable characters, nonsensical continuity, a complete disregard for the world that they're adapting, and a lot of pandering. A lot of people online were angry at Charlie Burnett for saying that Anakin blew up the Death Star or something.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
He repeated it like twice, which showcased the fact that maybe the people working on these shows really just don't give a shit about the source material at all. But when you disregard the source, you're disregarding the only thing that people really care about regarding your show. This is a new show, and you're not going to win fans over by adapting carelessly or even criticizing a lot of your target fan base on a talk show.
When people watch The Hate You Give, what do you want them to walk away with? Because I know everyone has a slightly different feeling.
Well, I mean, white people crying actually was the goal. It was the goal.
Alright there, chill out, Missy. I didn't do nothing to you. I love Star Wars, and I'm excited for new things about it, but The Acolyte is everything wrong about what Star Wars is today, and frankly, I have no time for it, and I don't think any of you should allocate your time or funds to it either. These shows feel like something that was written by someone who heard about what Star Wars is, and then they decided to write an entire show about it. But I will be watching things that actually interest me and actually care about the world. That's just me. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I'm gonna do. Now, if you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, then do give the channel a subscribe and like the video. I'm kinda new to this stuff, so these long-form videos are tough to churn out, especially when I've got to watch stuff like The Acolyte and The Rise of Skywalker. But I hope that I could still make these films, no matter how we feel about them or how I feel about them, somewhat interesting and entertaining, and also a bit of a lesson for maybe the future and hopefully for the better shows that we will see in this universe. So I appreciate every ounce of support that you can give. Either way, you've all been lovely, and I will see you